On this episode of Not Rod, we do something no one ever does these days, which is go down in cubic inches to make more power. As you may recall, in a reverse gear episode that we did, we were never really able to compression check all of the cylinders because the compression tester broke on us. And because this is not rod, we just decided to go ahead and just slap the motor in anyway. So I'm kind of curious to see where they're at. I'm sure there's probably at least 1 or 2 cylinders that are down from the others. And we're gonna check it out and see which ones they are. And once we find which ones are low, we're gonna do some leak down tests and find out exactly why they're low. I think it's probably going to point us towards pistons and rings and cylinder walls and stuff like that, but never know.
Wowzer, that's a bad one.
Oh, that's terrible. I mean, I think we're beginning to see why it only makes 230 something horsepower. Yeah. Okay, so here's our results. Cylinders 3 and 5 were 70 and 80. So obviously that's terrible. Those cylinders are right next to each other. It makes me wonder though, if maybe the head gasket is like blown between those 2 cylinders or something, and so it's leaking from one cylinder into the other. So this here is a leak down tester. And what we're going to use this for is to check where the pressure loss is between those 2 cylinders. I suspect that the head gasket is probably blown right there in between the 2 cylinders. And I'm going to hook the leak down tester onto number 5 through the spark plug hole. And if my theory is correct, I should be able to feel air coming out through the spark plug hole on number 3. I don't feel anything in there at the moment. Yeah, definitely got some blow-by coming through the engine. So yeah, it's just all blow-by. It doesn't seem to be coming from anywhere else. So this here is a piston. And this is what happens to a piston when hardware falls down into the combustion chamber. It's not good. You don't want hardware going down into your combustion chamber. This piston, however, is out of the legendary 327 Chevy small block. The engine actually used to be in my Jeep years ago, and this happened, and it's a long story, so I'm not going to go into it, but anyway, then I swapped it out for a 350. And since the cylinder walls are actually in good shape in the 327, I'm going to be as cheap as possible and see if I can just get a replacement piston. So once again, this is another truck engine, came out of a 67 Chevy pickup. But even still, in 1967, basically in all the engines, they were putting flat top pistons in, which is way better than what that 350 came with in 1972. Okay, Mr. Head. Yeah, baby.
Well, are you gonna knock everything out of it?
No. I'm gonna do one piston. I know that seems super duper cheeseball, and it is. But the point is to just get basically an engine in the Nova that might even have a little more power than the 350, so the Nova still runs while we rebuild the 350 right.
Yeah. But you know, if it's a little bit loosey-goosey on the pistons, that's all the better to throw some nitrous at it.
That's true. That's true. That'll help fatten up that ring gap.
Yeah.
Nitrous and a bunch of blow-by.
Yeah. So you're already at 30 thousandths on this big guy.
Okay, so it's 30 thousandths over. So what to do now? 3 of the head bolts going into the block are helicoiled in here. This one, it looks like they had a hell of a time trying to get this bolt out because this hole is really big and it's actually getting pretty close to the cylinder wall here. And not only was there a damaged piston from the nut that fell down into the intake, but this piston here also got damaged from the washer that fell into the intake. So we're actually just going to go ahead and replace all the pistons and rings while we're at it. This here is what you don't want to see. See how it's got little grooves in here that have worn down to this red brownish color down in there? That's the other layer in here that it's worn down into. Okay, crankshaft removal, engage. Okay, so now this thing's all disassembled and ready for a bath. This is how you know you're a die-hard engine builder. All right, we're back with our 327 small block Chevy build. And as you know, the plan on this thing was to just go as cheap as we possibly can, no machine work, anything like that. Just a cheap dingle ball hone on the cylinders and stuff, which we've already done. But I'm kind of gonna be going back on one of my campaign promises here because I got a new set of pistons for it that were very similar to the ones that came out of it. And then I weighed them to see if they were even anywhere close. If the pistons that I got new were heavier than the ones that came out of it, I could just shave a little bit of material off of them and have them work. But the problem is the new pistons that I got were actually 14 grams lighter than the ones that I pulled out of it, and no combination of wrist pins that I could put together would make it work. And even though I want to go as cheap as possible on this thing, I still want the bottom end to live. And let's be honest, what's the point in having a 327 if you're not going to spin it past 6,000 RPM, right? And so since the rotating assembly would have needed to be rebalanced even with those pistons, I decided to kind of splurge and get a set of these. These are hyper-eutectic pistons. These have 2 valve reliefs instead of 4, but these are a little bit deeper, so they're actually the same volume as the other pistons, but the compression height on these pistons is a little bit taller. So this is actually going to give us a static compression of 9.2 to 1 and a dynamic compression with the cam that's already in the Nova of 7.8 to 1. So these pistons cost about 250 bucks for the set. Between rings, gaskets, oil pump, new pan, that was all about 200, so we're about 440 bucks for parts there. And then I found an RPM air gap intake manifold that was open box, so I got that for 230 bucks. Then with machine work, that was about 700 bucks to get everything balanced. I also had the mains on the crank turned down because we had that one that was in really bad shape, so they took about 10 thousandths off the rods and mains. And we're gonna reuse the heads and all the valve train off the 350 that's already in the Nova, so we're not spending anything there. So all together, we're only into this thing for $1,370, and it's gonna have a pretty good balanced rotating assembly. So there we go, now we got rings on all the pistons. Now we gotta check clearances on the rod journals, and then we can start slapping pistons in. Bam! How long would you say that took? 2 hours maybe? Well, I don't know if it's quite a record on removing a small block Chevy, but not too bad. Okay, motor's out. Okay, so we got down to the point on the 327 where we couldn't really do any more work on it until we got the 350 out of the Nova so that we can pull the top end off of this thing and move all the valve train over to that motor, cam, heads, all that stuff. These are 202 intake, 160 exhaust, Sportsman 2 heads, 64cc combustion chambers, and 200cc intake runners. And what we're doing on the valve train here is, since we're using the cam, lifters, all that stuff out of this engine, it's all gonna go in the 327. I'm gonna keep everything organized in the same spot it came out of. As long as I keep the same lifters on the same lobes on the camshaft and the rockers on the same valve and everything, all the push rods in the same spot, you know, it should work just fine. So cylinder number 5 looks like it's had something go through the rings there. You can see that streak. Yeah, right there, it's 12 thousandths over at the very tippy top. So those two are just totally wiped out. Those two are junk. There we go. Spins nice and free, minimal slop. Whew. So that turned into a little bit of a fiasco the other night to put these heads on. As you may remember, when I first tore this block down, I found that a few of the head bolts had Healy coils in the holes. And one of those Healy coils came back to bite us. On the very last head bolt, on the very last torque sequence, one of the Healy coils decided to rip out of the block. And it took a bunch of the threads in the block with it. All the threads at the top of that hole were wiped out with the Healy coil when it ripped out, but there was still some threads in the bottom, and I didn't think that a new Healy coil was going to be able to grab onto that. So what I did was I took some steel reinforced epoxy, which sounds much more sophisticated when you say it like that rather than calling it by its actual name. Put it on the outside of a Healy coil, thinking that maybe that epoxy would adhere to the block in there and kind of make its own set of threads. And then put the Healy coil in, and now I just got done torquing all the bolts. They all went to 65 foot-pounds. That last one that stripped out, I was able to make the torque wrench click several times at 65 foot-pounds. Seems like it's holding just fine. So now we can finally take this thing and roll it outside and throw some paint on it. Okay, so we got the pan, timing chain cover, and harmonic balancer on, and now we're gonna go and start throwing the valve train in. So now, valve covers, and this sucker is ready to go back in the car. Or actually, this is ready to go in the car for the very first time ever. And now for the thing that I am probably the most excited about for this build. The Muncie 4-speed. That's right, we are switching out the 3-speed for a 4-speed, finally. Basically, the story goes, this eccentric billionaire Bruce Wayne type dude had a 71 Corvette, and he wanted the engine to make more power, and he just had to have a Rock Crusher 4-speed. So this and the original motor came out. The guy that pulled it and swapped the new stuff in was actually going to use this transmission in his own car, but then he decided to just go with a 6-speed instead. So he said, go ahead and throw oil in this thing and it'll work great. And I was dumb enough to believe him, so that is exactly what we're gonna do. But that's not the whole story. The funny ending is that after installing a 450 horse crate engine, the guy said it made too much power and spent more money to swap it out for a lower horsepower engine. I know, crazy, right? The other thing that this forced me to do is because from 71 to 74, being that they all had 32 spline turbo 400 style outputs, is I could no longer use the 27 spline yoke on the driveline that was on the 3-speed. So I had a brand new driveline made up with a 32 spline yoke and 1350 U-joints on both ends. And then of course, to accept that larger 1350 U-joint at the axle, I have to change out the yoke there too. But all of this stuff now is going to be sheer beef, and I am super excited to get in the Nova and start shifting a 4-speed again. The reverse rod is too long. Off by like 5/8 of an inch. Put a few more threads on this guy. That will work. Cool. And it works good like that, and that's what matters.
That is what matters. Might be able to do
this. We might
this.
just barely be able to make it. Okay, so we're up against the shifter now, so we actually do need to cut that hole back a little bit. Sawzall time.
Ooh, don't cut me.
Hopefully not kill you. Okay, that's probably good.
Coming in. Oh, your 350 emblems are no longer correct.
I know. Man, whatever we're gonna do, we just scrap the project.
Yeah.
Just scrap it.
Scrap it.
This side's ready to go
Yeah,
down.
that side's ready to go down. That it looks like it needs to come that way a little
The
bit.
tail needs to come this way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to cut this out a little bit more then. Fine! You want me to cut more out? I will! That'll probably drop her in. Well, I guess if you want to tighten those up, then I'll go ahead and throw the cross member on.
Okay.
How you liking that trans tunnel?
That's looking pretty classy. It's like something exploded out the side.
First and second's good, but the floor is going to need to be hammered on a little bit so that linkage for third and fourth works free. But I think it's close enough that I can just throw a bar up there and pound on it a little bit and fit. Okay, so this pinion has a crush sleeve on it in here, and once you get these set, you're not supposed to take them back off, even if you have a leaky seal or whatever. But I have to change this yoke to a 1350 yoke. So what I'm gonna do is, once again, do things the wrong way, and I'm gonna mark the nut right here to a corresponding mark right here on this yoke. And then once I get it to break loose, I'm gonna take a torque wrench and I'm gonna tighten it back down to that mark and see what the torque wrench reads. It'll just be a dial torque wrench. And then I'll know what I need to torque this back down to when I put the new yoke back on. Probably not gonna be totally exact, but hopefully it'll get it close enough that it's got the right preload. Okay, the moment of truth. After all of this, will the shaft be the correct length? Go in your hole!
She go in?
I mean, it's going. It's just those splines are rusty. Everything on this freaking build so far has just been so, like, super tight. Oh, yeah, there we go, baby. Okay. Driveline is in. That's exciting. Brandon finally figured out that he can just let me get underneath my own cars, so it's been kind of a workout under there. We got one more thing to do, get the headers hooked up to the exhaust, and then it's moving up top and getting this thing to the point where it'll run.
You almost need like some blocks. Maybe it'll last forever, I don't know.
All right, so we're just topping off fluids. So I can just put my drill on this and then get the pump primed with it. And I think we're ready to test fire this thing at that point.
Okay, which way does this go on?
Oh, beats me, man. I can tell the accelerator pump is going to need more fuel. It goes super lean when I get on it.
Oh, does it? Oh, yeah, it does. I can see it. Oh, yeah, that's why it's popping.
That's why it pops like that. But it's running pretty good aside from that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we know it runs. We could even just shut it down for the night. And I think next thing really is just take it on the road and drive it. All right, well, that's it for the night. Next time we'll be driving it. You know, my dad once told me that his dad told him that the best way to break a motor in is to run it hard. That way it never knows any different. Seems like pretty sound logic.
Yeah. Yep, you know what? I think the next thing for this thing should be exhaust.
Yeah, probably. Sure the next thing shouldn't be some window rollers with clips on them?
Yeah. Well, that might be good.
You like that spinning tire, do you? Got a good name for this. Rusty. So I got this GPS app that'll time our 0 to 60.
Okay, you want me to time it when you're ready to go?
Yeah.
How do you start it?
I don't know. Somebody's coming up behind us. Whoa. Oh, that's reverse. Breaking up, it's leaning out for some reason. That's weird.
It is weird.
Not sure why it was doing that.
I like, maybe that is the secondaries coming in full.
Maybe. Okay, so I pulled the carburetor off the car and pulled the secondary stuff apart and blew everything out just to make sure everything was working. And when I got to looking at this metering block that I put in the secondaries, I think it was actually made defective. These two large holes right here are what feed the boosters. And those holes are fed by these holes right here. And if you look down inside those holes, they are not drilled all the way through. So I'm gonna drill those through and hopefully that fixes it. So funny story, while I was drilling out the holes in this metering block, I broke the drill bit off in one of the holes. So I took the metering plate that had already been in that carburetor previously and drilled the holes out in that to about an 83 size jet. Now the car runs absolutely perfectly. It's actually a little bit rich now. So I'm going to send this back with the broken drill bit off in there. And what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? They deny my claim because they screwed up on it, so whatever. And then I'll get a new block so that I can lean it back out a little bit to about 12.5 at wide open throttle. And now to top off the drivetrain, I'm going to install a traction device. Probably the biggest pain about installing one of these is that you actually have to press out the bushings in the front of the springs and install a solid bushing in there. Okay, so I got the spring out, which was pretty low drama since we already had everything all apart not too long ago. So now I just got to get this bushing pressed out of the front, get the new one pressed in, then this can all go back together, except this time without wheel hop. And I think I can actually just use this bushing to drive the old one out and just kind of do it all in one step. Okay, so now you want this roll pin to go on the upper side of the spring. This slips over like this, and then we slide our pin through here. Washer here, which should just help keep everything from clunking around too much. And then this will go on here. And this bolt goes in from the other side, like that. There it is. So that's the front assembly, and then this can all just get pushed right back up to the subframe and bolted in with the 3 bolts that held it in before. Okay, and then once you get the spring back up in place, you replace this lower pad with this one. Okay. And so then once you get all that in there, you just have to install this bar between the 2 links. So now it's basically just a matter of getting everything tightened up over here, and I'll go over and install the one on the other side. Then I can start adjusting the bars and getting everything set up the way it needs to be. And then we can go racing. Oh, that's how you know you're getting tired. Gotta settle that suspension. All right, so when I built the 327, I really wanted to put it on a dyno and see how much horsepower it made, but it would have been like 400 bucks to do that. So instead, I opted to just plop it on the local linear dyno, also known as a quarter-mile racetrack. Since a quarter mile is a set distance and you know the weight of the car, you can use your mile per hour number at the end of that to calculate how much horsepower your engine makes. But unfortunately, last weekend, when we were going to go to the quarter-mile track, we once again got rained out. So this weekend, we're here at our favorite 8th mile track, which won't be quite as accurate as a quarter-mile run, I don't think, but the 8th mile should get us kind of in the ballpark, so I'll know about what kind of horsepower this thing's making. The other thing I've done since you guys last saw the car is I've topped it off with a Barry Grant 750 double pumper, so this thing really rips now. So really anxious to see what it'll do. Brandon's going to be here pretty soon with the Studebaker. We're also going to see what that thing can do. And on that one, we've topped that off with two 850 double pumpers, did some port matching between the intake manifold and the heads, and bumped the compression up by a half a point to 13:1. So it should definitely make it into the 6s this time around.
Yeah.
Bam. Uh-oh. It sounded like it just cranked over fast and then just stopped. If we can't get the wacky machine going, we cannot race.
Well, I can walk out.
You'd probably be stranded down there anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Don't want that.
So this will be the first launch with these Cal tracks. I'm not sure if they need any adjustment, so we'll see how it goes. Shifter got stuck. Got stuck in a gear. I don't think I can drive back like this though. It's either stuck in 2nd or 3rd. All right, well, gotta figure out what happened there then. I think it got stuck in 2nd and it's not letting me go into 3rd. I've shifted this thing really hard, I don't know how many times on the road, and it's never had this problem, and of course I go to race. And now it's stuck in a gear. So even though it got stuck in 2nd gear, it still ran a 9.6. So if I can get it into 3rd.
Well, I think I'm gonna go make a pass.
Okay, let's have you make a pass. We'll come back and fix mine. Looks like you got pretty squirrely coming out of the hole though.
Oh yeah, it was way squirrely out of the hole.
7.31.
7.31.
First run.
Yeah.
We're 2 for 2 on problems so far. Mine got stuck in 2nd, and he's got a little bit of an oil leak on the remote filter that he put on his car just the other day. So the other issue I had was when I was sitting there, my forehead got all sweaty and I got sunscreen in my eye. So basically I had to do the whole thing with one eye closed. So that was kind of neat.
I seen you way on the center divider when you got up there.
Yeah, I had one eye closed and I was trying to shift it and all this stuff going on.
Oh yeah.
So that was fun. Oh, there we go. So I got it to move and then it went too far, so now it's like stuck in 1st. Good thing I didn't patch the hole in the floor yet. Okay, got it unstuck. So I think I'm gonna take it for a quick lap just to make sure all the gears still work. And I'll be right back.
I put a oil filter relocation kit on it down here. And I thought I cranked that fitting in there pretty good. I put sealer on it and everything, but for whatever reason it was starting to dribble a little bit. Tighten it up, we'll see what happens.
All right, it works. the linkage probably needs some adjustment, and I might have just, when I was shifting, didn't push it hard enough over to that side to get it to switch from the one shifter to the other. So we'll see. I'm gonna give it another pass and maybe just, you know, not shift quite so hard just so I can get a full run in, and go from there. Okay, we found a guy that had some pipe dope, so we put that on there, and hopefully that'll seal this thing up. Still leaking? Must be a bad casting or something.
Yeah. Might as well try and give it just a little bit more.
The threads still haven't ripped out, so.
They haven't ripped out. Feels like they probably don't got a whole lot of life left in them, but.
All right, so we just can't get that fitting to seal up. He went as tight as it would go without stripping the threads out, and it just was still leaking. It was a little less every time, but it was still leaking. So he ran to the auto parts store. He's gonna go pick up the right filter to just pull all of this remote filter stuff off, and he'll just mount it right back to the block how it was. In the meantime, I'm gonna go for another run in the Nova, and hopefully I can get it to shift right this time. So that right there is why we are fixing Brandon's oil leak problem before we race again. We do not want to be that guy that sprays the track. Broke up at about 6,000, and then it was vibrating. It looked like the hood was vibrating, and I thought maybe I broke a motor mount, but I don't know. It seems to be working just fine at the moment, so I'll have to just go through and check everything out. But hey, I finally beat somebody. That's my first time I've ever won a race, even in a test and tune. All right, well, I think whatever that was, it must have just been all in my head. It definitely broke up at 6,000 RPM towards the end of the track in third gear. So next run, I'm gonna keep an eye on my air-fuel ratio and just make sure it's not leaning out. But whatever the shake was I was feeling, I think it was just all in my head because it broke up like that, so.
Okay, so this time we tried Teflon tape, and I cinched it down good and tight, so we'll try that. If that doesn't work, then I have to take it all off and just put a regular filter back on it. I think that'll work.
I don't know, Brandon, I think you're gonna be disappointed.
You're gonna be disappointed. No sixes? Oh, yeah, that was a good one. 6.718 at 104.74.
That's a good run right there.
That's what I was looking for.
Well, that's definitely worth the mods for sure.
Yeah, and that blew my 699 that I was shooting for out of the water.
Yeah, it blew it out of the water.
I'm wondering too, maybe lower the tire pressure just a touch more.
Give it another run, see if we can hit a 6.6.
She's moving pretty good. I'm stoked.
All right, so my tire pressure was at 16 and 17, so I dropped them down to 13, and we'll see if we can get a little bit better of a launch. Except I broke my seat. Freaking back of my seat broke. That felt like a pretty good run. It launched so hard the back of my seat broke and I went like this and I could barely reach the pedals to shift. Like I had to like lunge my body forward to hit the clutch pedal while I was shifting. Oh, goodness gracious, but that was fun. I kept up with that street bike pretty good. All right, so I calculated the mile per hour number for the 8th mile and I came up with 266 horsepower, which is already quite a bit more horsepower than the 350 was making. And honestly, I think there's a lot more left in this thing. We can't really get a good hookup at the starting line. I bet you if I ran this thing in the quarter, the mile per hour there would say it's making at least 300. So next step, I guess, is to get it down the quarter mile so we can actually get a more accurate horsepower number.
That last run, I couldn't really see the AFR gauge, but the run before that, I noticed we were running at about 13.2, which really isn't too bad, but I think we want to just richen it up just a little bit. So right now we're changing the jets on these things, give this a little bit more fuel. Oh, wow, 6.773. So what was it, 6.7?
I thought it was a little bit faster last time, but man, 6.7 twice in a row.
That's 2 miles an hour faster.
106.34.
Yeah.
I want to calculate that and see. 600 horsepower.
600 horsepower.
Yep.
Well, that sounds about right.
Cool. Well, I think I might call that a wrap. I think that's a pretty good day of racing.
I think so too.
Just got to get my seat fixed. Right off the line.
Surprise.
It's got like rust falling out of it and stuff. Yeah, definitely need an upgrade in the seat department. So I picked myself up a set of these seats right here. These are actually out of a 73 or 4 Vega, which are exactly the same as what you would find in that era of Camaro, like 71 to 81. And these also, believe it or not, were the same seat frames that you would find in a 72 Nova SS. However, these are ugly. We just can't have this in the Nova. This is too ugly. So I got an upholstery kit to change this out to black vinyl. Now, even though I have never done seat upholstery before, I have been told that it is a must that you have a pair of these hog ring pliers. So now with my new little tool, I am going to get in here and give it a try. That foam is just gonna look gorgeous underneath there, I'm sure. Okay, new seat cover. So far, this hasn't really been too bad of a job. Yeah, I'm actually pretty proud of that. All right, so after all that work, I gotta see how this bad boy feels. Oh yeah, that is much better than the bricks that are in it now, I'll tell you that. All right, so I've been playing with the shifter here in the driveway, seeing if I can get it to replicate the problem. You know, going from like second and then pushing it over towards the side to see if I can get it to pop out and while the transmission holds in second. I can't get it to replicate the problem. What I'm thinking might have been going on is that first time I ran, my timing between pushing on the clutch and shifting the shifter probably wasn't quite right, so I had tension on the gears inside of the transmission. And if you got tension on the gears, it's not going to want to pull out of gear and into neutral. So then the shifter was able to go into neutral and go over into the 3/4 side while the transmission was still in second. And either way, it shouldn't do that. Even if you've got tension on the gears in the transmission, all that should happen is it just won't go from second into neutral. So we've obviously got an alignment issue with the shafts. So what I'm gonna do is bias the linkage by like 2 threads so that it pops from second into neutral just a little bit earlier. When you're trying to speed shift, you're always going from first, second, and then second to third. So the only time that would ever be a problem is if I was like putting around town, was in first and then shifted from first into neutral. So hopefully that doesn't become a problem, but at least like for racing, it should work a lot better, I think. Wait a second. We already did this in episode 1. I guess we'll just skip to the quarter mile then. All right, so today we are back out at the quarter mile, what I call the local linear dyno, because I didn't want to spend $400 to put the 327 on a dyno after I built it. So my number is 108. If I can hit 108 miles an hour, that means this engine should be making about 330 horsepower, which was my goal. If not, well, it wouldn't be the first time you've seen fail on Knot Rod. It's probably what you come back for at this point. So when I first put the cowl tracks on, I only tightened it a quarter turn. That's where they say to start. And what I think was happening is they were so loose, it was hitting hard, unloading, and then it was coming back down and making traction. So I went an extra quarter of a turn, so now they're preloaded a half a turn. Really, you want a monoleaf or a split monoleaf if you want these to grab well, but I'm mostly concerned about breaking stuff from axle wrap, so I'm just using the multi-pack springs, and it's fine for that. Damn, he put me up against a fast car. No way I'm beating this guy, but we'll try our best. To have been over 100. I guess we'll find out. I don't see how it couldn't have been, but thank you. 104 miles an hour. 13.6 at 104 miles an hour. That's awesome. For me anyway, that's freaking fantastic. Sweet, dude, I am stoked. I thought maybe building this engine was just gonna be a bust and it was gonna make no more power than the 350. It actually did pretty good. I'm gonna calculate this 104.43. It's not quite as much horsepower as I wanted. I was shooting for 330. I calculated it's just under 300, which, hey, I'm happy with that. At least we got an engine that runs on all 8 cylinders while we build another one. So we're gonna run back out there, run it again, and maybe we can hit like a 13.4 or something. Beat a Durango. My first quarter mile race, I actually beat somebody. Not quite as good that time.
No, it was 13.7? Sure.
It was running a little bit lean. It was at about 13.2.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I might throw the vacuum secondary on it, and just kind of as an experiment. You always hear that vacuum secondaries are faster than mechanical because then the motor only gets the air when it needs it. Figure why not experiment and see. I have a feeling that's complete hogwash, but
yeah.
Club soda? I really have a feeling this thing is going to be way slower with a vacuum secondary, but it's an experiment. We'll see. This is what we do on Knot Rod. We do things that are going to make our cars slower, just to answer you guys' stupid questions.
I don't know that very many people are questioning this, but
maybe what the internet says just has me curious. So it goes like this. Most people say that with an automatic, you're probably better off with a vacuum secondary because you just hold your foot on the floor, the secondaries will open up, you know, and the RPMs get up in like first gear, and then they'll stay open in all the gears because you never take your foot off the gas. But in a manual, if you're constantly shifting and taking your foot off the gas, then they say normally a double pumper is the better way to go. Some people just say run a vacuum secondary no matter what, especially if you're running a 750. And we are running a 750, so like I say, I think that's BS. I think if you get a double pumper tuned in right on no matter what engine, the double pumper is always going to be better. It leaned out a lot on that one. By the time I got to the end of the track, it was like 14 to 1. I think maybe this supposedly high-performance fuel pump, there must be a problem with it or something. So I might actually just put the other fuel pump on. Unfortunately, I don't think we have enough time to do it tonight, but I think that's what it really needs. Yeah, it just keeps getting worse and worse. That was a 13.8 at 101. I'm gonna check what the fuel pressure looks like. Yeah, see, the fuel pressure is down below 2. Even if the gauge is off, I don't think it should be that low. So I think we're just running out of fuel, and I think it's just, I don't know, something's up with that high-performance pump. Either that or it's vapor lock. Some of those fuel lines are kind of close to the headers, and the AFR gauge leans out more and more as the engine gets warmer. Clearly got some more fuel system work to do. So this is where we must unfortunately end, on a bit of a disappointment. But honestly, I bet if we strapped this thing to a dyno in a controlled environment, we'd easily pick up that extra 30 horsepower I was after. But either way, if you wanted to see nothing but victory, you'd tune into something else. This is better, because it's real. Sometimes the victory is just in the unwavering resolve to never give up, and you'll be sure to get plenty of that right here on Knot Rod. In the words of Winston Churchill, we shall never surrender. Old gas cap's about to fall out. It's nice.
Oh, that's a good spot for it. You don't want it?
Not while I'm racing.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? It's gonna get hot as in here. Maybe I'll take one of them.
Way back, you may want it.
Yeah, I'll take one of them.
One of them? Yeah.
It's still stuck in second.
Oh,
I'm gonna back the trailer up and then get the car up on the ramps and have kind of a workspace and get underneath the car and get it out of second. So I may have to
be able to put it in reverse?
No, that's a good point. How you doing? No. And wear the Knot Rod logo off the back of this sweatshirt. 4 speeds are badass. What's that?
You got a handle?
Oh, I'll get you out. That floor is looking sweet.
Is it now?
I might be welding a few patches in.